All right, so it's Fitness Tip Friday, and what I really want to talk about is the ability to control movement and how a lot of people believe that you should categorize movement as a good movement or bad movement. But I'm here to dispel a lot of myths. There's no such thing as a good movement and bad movement. Now, what there is the ability to control a movement through a range of motion. So I'm going to give you a perfect example. Let's talk about someone who's a little bit older. You lose the ability to put your hand over your head. And when you lose that ability, then an overhead press will become a bad movement. But now that we know that it's a bad movement, we got to figure out why we lost that ability. Because you should be able to do that ability and you should be able to have your hand overhead. So what we would do is actually work you back through there, connect the brain back to the muscles, because everything starts up here. A lot of people think about it just starts in the muscle. No, it starts about you thinking about it. It goes down the central nervous system out to the muscles to move your bones and to get you in your placement. So everything starts up here, whether you're trying to muscle build, trying to just do daily chores, anything like that. It's just we become so used to it being automatic that we can do the movement. But sometimes when you get injured or you are in a poor mechanical position all day, like a lot of people sit down, you need to really think about your movement. And this is where it may be complex. So I'll give you a perfect example. A lot of people would say a squat would be a bad movement. You don't have to do this. Don't get yourself there. Now, if your goal is just strictly to build muscle, you can do it without the squat. But you lose a lot of the benefits of the skill set of having a squat because you should be able to squat the rest of your life, especially a body weight squat. You should have the ankle mobility. You should have the hip mobility. You should have the thoracic spine mobility. So maybe you figure out why you cannot squat and then you work on that to make that a better range of motion because this becomes more of a focus as we age is our ability to move and move properly and to prevent injury. Now, if you're younger and you're thinking about squatting, and if you can perfect it now, you actually can overload the body more and maybe have a potential, especially depending who you are, to build more muscle. So learning how to squat can help you out tremendously, right? Because now we can overload the legs and the body with a lot more weight. For example, there's squatters who can do 1,000 pounds on the squat, but they can't leg extension 1,000 pounds because now you get to overload the body. Now let's break down this even further. What movements should you be capable of doing? So there's 5 main movements that you should be able to do. Those are squatting. So we just talked about that. You should be able to hinge. So when we're talking about hinging, think about deadlift, Romanian deadlifts, things like that. Then you should have the ability to press. So that's like bench press, dumbbell bench press, those type of a push up, those type of movements. You should be able to row. You should be able to pull things, keep your back strong. So for example, some things like you may not be pulling all the way, but like a Zercher squat, a cable row that's bent over, a bent over row. These movements to make the back strong and put you in a strong position. Then you should be able to overhead press a barbell or some sort of object. Now, you should be able to have that in line with your ear easily, but you may have a poor range of motion, especially in today's time. We're at a computer all day, rounding forward. So you have to teach yourself that posture. You should always have that overhead. It's going to put your shoulder in the safest position possible. Now that brings me to the next movement that you hear that people are talking about is bad for you. The behind the neck press or behind the neck lat pull down. It's not necessarily a bad movement. What happens is people either overload it too much or they don't have the range of motion to try to do that and they cause themselves an injury or a pinch. Everything comes down to your personal needs and your personal goals. So if your range of motion does not work in certain areas, how do you get better? You can hire a personal trainer. You have to search this for yourself. Or you can go and just feel through the movement. Just move through it. Don't do it with weight. Just move through the movement and then figure out what is your limiting factor in the movement. For example, at the squat, you don't get to the bottom. Well, what feels tight? Does it feel your hips or your ankles? Well, let's just say it's your ankles. Well, what do I do? Then you can search it up. There's a lot of things to search up there. That being said, do the 5 movements you should be able to complete every week. Is a squat, a row, a hinge, a push, and an overhead press. All 5 you should be able to do on a weekly basis and be fine. You should be doing these to your even in your 80s, 90s, hundreds, whatever you want to say. Be able to do those 5 movements. You should be really good.